We've seen players come back from major injuries. Take Kevin Durant, for example. Since tearing his Achilles in the 2019 NBA Finals, the Slim Reaper has looked better than ever since returning from injury. Durant didn't seem to miss a beat and almost carried the Brooklyn Nets to the 2021 NBA Championship. In their 7-game series loss to the eventual champion Milwaukee Bucks, Durant averaged 35.4 points, 10.6 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, and shot 50% from the field and 35% from 3, all while playing nearly 43 minutes a game. He even played all 48 minutes in Game 5 and all 53 minutes of the Game 7 overtime loss. It's safe to say that Durant is just as good, if not better, than the pre-Achilles injury version of himself. Unfortunately, not all players come back the way Kevin Durant did. For some, their fates changed forever when they suffered these career-altering injuries. Here are the greatest NBA careers ruined by injuries. Grant Hill. To the younger generation, Grant Hill may just be an announcer they hear on TNT broadcasts or even NBA 2K, but to the fans who grew up in the 90s, they know what Grant Hill is all about.
Matumbo on Thorpe, Waylock on Hunter. Oh, hello.
Many say Grant Hill was LeBron James before LeBron James. Like the King, he was a built, ultra-athletic, 6'8" wing with guard-like skills. Many believed him to be the next torchbearer and face of the NBA after Michael Jordan. Grant Hill was that good. He won co-Rookie of the Year with Jason Kidd in '95, started in the All-Star game in his debut season, and made 5 All-Star selections in his 6 seasons with the Detroit Pistons. In those 6 years, Hill amassed a total of 9,393 points, 3,417 rebounds, and 2,720 assists. The only player who eclipsed those numbers in their first 6 years are LeBron James, Larry Bird, and Oscar Robertson. Unfortunately, the injury bug hit the former Duke star as soon as he went to the Orlando Magic in the summer of 2000. Right in his prime at 28 years old, Hill was hampered with ankle injuries throughout his tenure in Orlando, and this pretty much changed his career for good. Once an explosive, above-the-rim athlete, Hill lost his bounce. He did make the All-Star team once again in 2005, but he was just a shell of his former self by then. Hill went on to play until he was 40 and became a solid role player in the second half of his career, particularly with the Phoenix Suns. He still made the Hall of Fame despite the ankle issues, but it's still worth wondering just how Grant Hill would have looked like through his prime, especially if we saw him alongside the next man on the list, Tracy McGrady. In his prime, Tracy McGrady was one of the deadliest 3-level scorers in the NBA. In the 2000s, people mentioned T-Mac in the same breath as Kobe Bryant. That's how good he was. In fact, the late great Lakers legend admitted he wished that he'd played along McGrady.
I always wish if I had one player to play with, it was this guy. Because he could do everything I could do, but he was taller.
You would have liked that too.
When I talk to kids about that, that's what I tell them. They ask about the hardest player I ever had to defend. I said, it's pretty easy. Well, it was Tracy, because he could do everything I could do.
That's some high praise from Kobe, and he was right. McGrady was capable of doing everything Kobe could, and he did it at the highest of levels. McGrady averaged 32.1 points as a 23-year-old in the 02-03 campaign, and 28 in 03-04, capturing the scoring title in back-to-back seasons. He also went 7 straight seasons averaging at least 24 points per game. By the 2006 season, his injuries began to creep up, and it only piled up as his tenure with the Houston Rockets went on. He suffered a variety of injuries on his shoulder, his back, and most especially his knee, which pretty much derailed his explosiveness and speed. His decline began shortly after his 7th and final All-Star season in 06-07, and through his early 30s, he began bouncing around several teams in the league and even played in China for one season until his retirement in 2013. Bill Walton. Modern-day NBA fans are in awe of Nikola Jokic's insane passes, especially at the center spot, but if they dive deep enough into the NBA history books, they'd find Bill Walton serving those same slick dimes like the Joker does. Walton is still considered one of the greatest passing big men in NBA history, especially in the post. He had a penchant for finding cutters down on the block, and this became a staple of the Blazers' offense that dominated the league from 76 to 78. Through that stretch, Walton punched himself in the conversation for the best player in the NBA. He punctuated that when he led Portland to its first and only NBA championship in 1977 and winning Finals MVP en route to the finals, Walton and the Blazers swept Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. then took down the heavily favored Philadelphia 76ers, winning 4 straight games after falling to a 2-0 deficit. Walton continued his dominance the following season, leading the Blazers to 50 wins in 60 games, but his campaign was cut short after he suffered a broken foot. Walton had already been dealing with foot problems early in his career, but that injury in the 1978 season pretty much derailed the rest of his career. He later missed 3 seasons and 4 years due to the nagging foot issues and was never the same. Walton did finish his career on somewhat of a happy note in his first season with the Boston Celtics in 1986. He won the 6th Man of the Year award and became a key piece off the bench for Boston's 1986 title win. He retired 2 years later as his foot problems continued to persist. Penny Hardaway. Anthony Penny Hardaway was one of the most exciting young stars in the early 90s. Like Grant Hill, he immediately emerged as a potential heir to Michael Jordan's throne. He had all the talent to be a superstar. Hardaway had the size, quickness, length, and athleticism that made him one of the most dynamic offensive talents during his era. Though their duo was short-lived, Penny and Shaq formed an epic tandem for the Orlando Magic. In Hardaway's second season, the two led Orlando to the '95 NBA Finals, where they were swept by the more experienced Houston Rockets. In his first 4 years in the league, Penny made the All-Star team thrice, was named All-NBA First Team in '95 and '96, and averaged over 20 points per game in 3 of the 4 seasons. With Shaq leaving in the summer of '96, Hardaway became the lone star in Orlando. Unfortunately, this was also the time his injuries started to creep up. He suffered a career-altering knee injury early in the '97-98 season that ultimately took away his explosiveness. He wound up playing just 19 games that year. The knee injuries persisted and the surgeries kept coming, and eventually Penny's career no longer followed the superstar path it was on early in his career. Brandon Roy. Brandon Roy was an NBA star from day one.
His opportunities making the most. Roy goes inside and posterizes. Check some.
He won Rookie of the Year in 2007 and made the All-Star team as soon as his sophomore season. Roy was climbing the ranks as one of the best scoring guards in the NBA. He was so good that none other than Kobe Bryant said this about him.
That's a bad boy. And, I think making it the second time just kind of solidifies yourself in terms of being one of the premier players in the league.
In 2010, Bryant also said that Roy has no weaknesses in his game. However, as Roy was making his ascension, his knee issues started to creep in. During the 2010-11 season, Roy suffered a knee injury that was initially diagnosed as a bone bruise. Later evaluations revealed a slight meniscus tear. In 2011, he had arthroscopic surgery on both of his knees, and when he tried to return later in the season, he was simply never the same. But despite all this, Roy still had one more epic performance in him. In Game 4 of their first-round series against the eventual champion Dallas Mavericks, Roy scored 18 points in the fourth quarter to lead Portland to an improbable come-from-behind win. That wound up being Roy's lasting image in the NBA. He announced his retirement later in the summer as his knees degenerated so much due to lack of cartilage. Roy tried to make a comeback during the 2012-13 season and signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but he wound up playing just 5 games before undergoing yet another knee surgery and retired for good shortly after. Yao Ming. Yao Ming became a cultural icon for the game of basketball. He arrived in the NBA, and ascension to stardom expanded the game globally, especially to Chinese fans. Many were skeptical about the 7'6" giant when he was drafted first overall in 2002. He had a slow start to his career, but his popularity made him an all-star starter in his rookie season. Eventually, Yao came into his own and proved he not just belonged in the NBA, but can also be one of its top stars. He made the All-NBA team 5 times in his career and carved out career averages of 19 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 1.9 blocks. But midway through his 20s, Yao eventually started developing issues on his foot. He had a myriad of foot injuries through the latter half of the 2010s. The foot and ankle issues persisted, and this forced him to miss the entirety of the 09-10 season. He played just 5 games in 2010-11 before a stress fracture in his left ankle ended his season once again. Yao retired from the game in July of 2010 due to his foot and ankle injuries. Despite a short NBA career, Yao earned high praises from a good friend and former rival.
He's probably the only guy that really tested me. And he tested me because he was 7'8", and he was hard to move. He couldn't stop me, but guess what? I couldn't stop him either. I put him in the category of a king. Like, hey, King, you can't stop me, but I know I can't stop that fadeaway.
Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas's fall is definitely sad considering his circumstances. Here was a guy who was picked last in the NBA draft primarily due to his size, but he didn't let his 5'9" stature prevent him from becoming an impact player in the NBA right away.
Isaiah all the way! They can't stop number 22! Isaiah Thomas here in the second half.
Eventually, Thomas became a two-time All-Star in Boston. One could even argue Thomas was on the verge of superstardom when he was with the Celtics. In the 2016-17 season, he averaged 28.9 points per game, which was third in the NBA behind MVP Russell Westbrook and James Harden. He led the Celtics to the best record in the East and established himself as the king of the fourth, averaging 9.8 points in the fourth quarter that season. During that same season, however, Thomas suffered a hip injury that pretty much derailed his career. It's unfortunate because he was never able to recover from it, and he never got the Brinks truck as a result. Thomas has been trying to work his way back into the NBA for quite a while now, but after failed attempts over the last couple of seasons, it's looking more like IT's time in the league is just about done. Derrick Rose. It's hard to argue against Derrick Rose's case as the biggest what if in NBA history. The man was literally on the way to top 75 greatest players ever status when he made his jump to superstardom in his epic MVP campaign. Rose became the youngest MVP in NBA history, a feat he still holds to this day, when he led the Chicago Bulls to the best record in the league during the 2010-2011 NBA season. He led the Bulls against the Miami Heat Big Three in the 2011 playoffs, but bowed out in 5 games. Nonetheless, that MVP campaign cemented him as a force to be reckoned with for years to come. That is, until that fateful day of April 28, 2012.
Oh, Rose came down bad on his left foot. See him holding onto his knee and down.
That call by Kevin Harlan probably still haunts Chicago Bulls fans to this day. Rose missed the entire 2012-13 season, tore his meniscus the following year, and was simply no longer on the steep trajectory towards superstardom that he was on during his MVP season. Now at 33, Rose has transitioned quite well into becoming a solid scoring spark off the bench the last few seasons. There's probably an alternate universe out there where D. Rose wins multiple MVPs, leads Chicago to its first NBA title since Michael Jordan, and carves out a Hall of Fame career. It's just unfortunate we'll never get to see it.